My advice now is about aligning your expectations, because you might think you're doing a good job, but how does that align to what your manager is trying to achieve? You need to have an open conversation around that, because generally employees and employers have misaligned expectations.
Hello and welcome to the Mentors Edition. I'm Michelle Chikanda, and today I'm delighted to bring you a guest who will answer what you do when you find yourself in a situation where you're interviewing and not getting the role. My guest is the head of Wholesale at Aviva, Apiramy Jeyarajah. She is a brilliant mind, but not somebody who did not face adversity as she climbed her way up their career ladder. So be sure to listen to some of the advice that she has, because I found her profound and inspiring and refreshingly honest. So if you're in that position in your career where you're trying to figure out, how do I go from one role to another, and how do I really take advantage of every environment I find myself in order to grow, then this podcast episode is for you. Appy has worked for some of the most prestigious financial institutions in the country. So be sure to have a piece of pen and paper and listen, because her career is a testament to how her way of thinking has led her to success. And if you want to be successful, I have zero doubt that you can learn heaps from her. Here's Appy.
Hi, Appy. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you. Let's just dive straight in. Tell us a little bit about you. You're obviously a very successful woman, and I'm really keen to know, where did all of this start?
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. Where it all started, I think, is just really from childhood. So, I grew up in northwest London. I came over to the UK when I was 2 years old. Didn't speak English. And it was really around trying to be the best, getting a good education, and working your way through and navigating a world that we live in today.
Interesting. So when you started school, you didn't speak English, or by the time you started school, you were speaking English?
So I was speaking Tamil. I'm a Sri Lankan Tamil. I spoke Tamil fluently. Did not speak a word of English when I arrived, which worried my father, and he spoke English to me just to speed up the way in which I picked up the language. So I was fluent by 4 or 5, I would think, not that I remember all of this very clearly, and then just went through normal British education.
Amazing. And so your parents moved you over here, and then you went to school. They also made a sacrifice, didn't they, right at the beginning of your education?
Yeah, they did, because they, being a Sri Lankan Tamil, it was all around education, and that was the answer to getting out of a financial situation to be successful, and they pride ourselves in that. So what they did do, they remortgaged my family home to get me into a private school. I had to get past the grades to do so, and I did. So when I did, that's what they did. Not that they ever complained about it. I didn't have any impact for that, but there was a responsibility on me, given that they had given up so much, that I had to be as successful as I could be. And that has been my drive throughout my career to date. Unconsciously, I would say, actually, as much as consciously.
And I guess, let's talk through the younger ages of your schooling life. So you knew that your parents had done this from the first moment, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you did carry that responsibility, and you felt like you had to be as successful as possible, as you just said. Did this mean that you behaved well at school, or did you go through normal teenage situations like we all did? Or did that, responsibility bear down on you enough for you to say, okay, I've just got to knuckle down and get through and get my work done?
Well, I think I was a typical teenager, to be honest. I mean, I still did rebel. I still wanted to do all those things. I wanted to, test out all the things that you're not allowed to have. But there was a level of responsibility there too. So I wanted to do as well as I could. But I wanted to do both aspects. So, my parents did have the same troubles as any other parent did as with a teenager, right the way throughout, and even right the way through to university as well.
Are you an only child, or did you have siblings?
No, I have a younger brother that's 5 years younger than me.
Okay. So you had someone to buffer. All the attention just wasn't focused on you.
Yeah, no, of course not. But I think the thing is that you were there's a different dynamic between daughters and sons.
100%.
And I would think that my brother got away with a lot more than I did. And
also he was the youngest, and everybody says the youngest always gets away with a lot more. You have to be the eldest, you have to show the way, and all of that. And
be more responsible.
Exactly. And you're the one that will look after your parents. This is the narrative. Okay, so then you get to university. Why did you decide to study? You studied maths or finance?
I did economics and statistics.
There we go. Why did you decide to study that? Because that just you can barely say it unless you have an education.
There wasn't much logic to this. I wanted to make sure my family was financially stable.
Okay. So again, that sense of responsibility.
Yeah. And so what I thought about was, how can I make money? And the city sounded really exciting. And there was a extended friend of the family that spoken about something that you could do in the city, which was, being on the trading floor and do it. So I thought, okay, why can't I do that? Okay. And so I sort of looked into it to see what sort of degrees you could do, and economics seemed to be the thing to do. And so I just did that. And the school. Did
you not think this is going to be hard?
I didn't think anything hard stopped me. It became a challenge of something that you needed to be able to achieve and be able to do. I mean, at A-levels, I did economics, statistics, and double maths. I did physics as well, sorry. It was economics, physics, and double maths.
Right. So, you are not fazed by something being challenging.
Yeah. And it makes it more, something that you want to sort of get your head around and win over, really.
Interesting. This is not normal. This is because the average person would think, oh no, that's a lot for me to do physics, to do economics. These are all, somebody else would have said, okay, let me pick an English or a media or a softer subject to fall back on. Talk me through this kind of thinking, it's hard, but I'm going to get it done mindset. Does it come from your family? Where does this come from? Help us to understand that better.
Gosh, you're really making me think about what my decision making has been. It did part come from my family. It was, growing up, I was always told that you're no less than anybody else. I think that was a great piece of advice that my father had given me growing up.
Yeah.
That you can be anything you want to be. So I think if I really think about it, that line that he had said to me, that you can be anything that you want to be, made me feel unstoppable. And he also said, when you grow up, you're bullied for not looking the same as everybody else and other things. But my dad did not want that to stop me. So he used to always say, well, don't worry about that. I'll deal with that, whether that's with your teachers or anything, which gave me the confidence to just work it through.
I love that. So you felt like, okay, we're in this team, my father and I, and he's I'm dealing with the operations
yeah.
and he's dealing with the strategic stuff. He's dealing with the other stuff that may deter me from getting the job done.
Yeah, I think so.
I love that. And I think that's really, really powerful because you then carry this forward into your career. Now, talk me through the moment you graduated, you're about to enter, the working world, and then you have this interview. You have a final stage interview. Tell us about that story.
So it was going through the interview process was interesting because I had no one to fall back on to give me advice on how to do this. You start off with psychometric tests. You do it's sort of a skill sets based interview process, and I got to the final stages of all the banking interviews. I was always the only female at the final stages, but I never got selected. And I was always asked really interesting questions. One being sort of, how would you cope being one of the only females on the trading floor? My response at that time was very innocent, because I'm one of few women in my family, really, because most of my cousins and things are boys. So I said, well, I'm in that environment the whole time, and it's fine. I can handle it. Now, in hindsight, and I can't say that right now, when I was going through that interview process, I thought that there was bias or anything in the system. What that said to me is just, it made me strive even harder.
Yeah.
So I sought feedback from the HR business partners that were doing the grad programs on why I didn't get through, what can I learn from it to do better for next time.
So normal people, or the average person, I know I certainly would have gone home and cried at that age without any career experience. Probably would have just gone home and cried and thought, no, is this the right thing for me to do? Maybe I should try, I don't know, another kind of graduate program. But you stopped and you said, I'm not doing well here for whatever reason. I've maxed out on my personal experience. Now I need to go out and seek the advice of those who know what they're doing. How did you have the confidence to reach that conclusion? Because I know people now that are in their 30s and 40s, when you say to them, go and ask for feedback, they can't do it. So how did you have the confidence? At this point, you're what, 18, 19?
Yeah, exactly. Well, no.
So you're 21 because it's
21.
Yeah, so you're 21, 22. How did you have the confidence to go and ask and say, okay, what am I doing wrong? Because when you ask, what am I doing wrong? Inevitably, you're going to be told. And then because they're not going to give you just positives. If it was just positives, you'd have had the job. So you're sort of putting yourself in the firing line to receive bad information about yourself. How did you have the guts or the confidence to do that?
So I don't think I saw it like that. The way I think I saw it, and again, it's one of hindsight, as you become a leader, you need to start thinking about what defines you and who you are. Yeah. I needed to learn to survive. My role was to survive. So I wanted to be as successful as I can be. And I was observing the environment around me. So I was listening and going, okay, what I read from this situation is this. I need to get better at these areas. So I didn't see it as a confidence thing. It was like, right, I need to get to the next stage. I need to get this job. I need to, be able to support my family. How was I going to get there if I don't get the information? So it's all unconscious. It wasn't that it was a conscious decision, and it absolutely was not. It wasn't confidence building when you're getting to the final stages of every one of these interviews of all the top banks and not making it through. Is quite disheartening. But you needed to sort of brush yourself up and go again. And it's the whole thing about failure. You can learn from your mistakes, but you've got to try. If you don't try, how are you going to succeed? Because you can sit there and not do it. And that's what was striving to be better has always been my unconscious thought process to make weaknesses into strengths.
But I love that, because it was only a failure until you got the job. Right? And that's the thing with failure. It's like, unless you're dead, it's almost impossible to fail. But like you said, you've got to try.
Yeah.
Only a failure if you stop. If you had stopped looking for the job, then you would have failed, but you kept going. So then you got this advice. Did they give you the advice? I have to actually just ask the question.
It's normally quite generic in terms of what they do say to you. It's no different from when I interview people, and how much positive feedback do you really give back? I think in my role now, I do that.
Yeah,
I want to uplift people, but the majority of back then didn't, and we're in a world that wants to be different now.
Yeah.
And you're making me really think about my past. I think what's interesting when we go through school is that you are goal orientated.
Yes.
you have to go and pass your 11 plus. You then go and do your GCSEs, you then do your A levels, and the next thing is to do jobs.
Yes.
And so you feel like you've achieved every time you go down that. So as a goal-orientated person, also the way the school system set up is to be goal-orientated. So I think originally, if I was to play back at 18 or 21, is that the goal was to get a job. It didn't matter how you got the job, you need to get a job.
I see.
But I think that changes, right? When you get the job, the question is, now what? Always, even in your personal life, it's you've got to meet somebody, you get a boyfriend, you get married, and then you have children. Now what? No one really knows that life is a real journey.
Yeah.
What is success? And so then, what that looks like when you get a job is a different thing altogether. You really got to think about how you define that.
So you then did get a job.
I did.
Well done, it paid off. Okay, so we're going to cover all of the things you just said because it is so very true. So you then get this job and you work there for a little while. And then what happened? What was your first job? Tell us, what was your first job? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my first job actually was before university. It was selling Yellow Pages.
I didn't even know Yellow Pages was sold. Anyway.
But which was fascinating because I was so keen on earning £100 and I can't remember how many Yellow Pages, it was like 500. But when you put them in the bottom of the car, it really sank the car. The cost of my dad having to then repair the car was a completely other thing, but that's another story. But I've done jobs. I've worked at Sainsbury's, I've done telephone market research, again to sort of earn money on the side. The first graduate job I got, I actually worked for an organisation called SEI that were based out in Philadelphia, and they had an office in London. And I went out to Philadelphia to work in their head office. And that was very exciting at that time because, I've never been...
job, America.
Exactly. Getting on a plane, you're not in economy. You're kind of going, oh my God, a car comes to pick you up. You're kind of feeling like you've really made it. And a limousine on the other side. It sounds all really exciting. But it wasn't banking. So, it was effective, success or failure. That first year of applying for a graduate job, I didn't make it in banking. I was focused in asset management and wealth management. It was SEI. It was, I went back and applied for banking 12 months to 18 months afterwards, which that's how I then got into ABN AMRO.
Because you had, but that 12 months gave you some experience, enough to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. And why didn't you stay there? Why did you stay at SEI?
It was a great experience. It was my own perception of what I define success to be. I thought at the time, so I was learning soft skills at SEI. I was working with relationships in large organizations, scoping out what sort of investment propositions they need to be. I thought in order to be successful is that I need to be technical. Okay. So I wanted to be right in the middle of learning about how you build investments, how, and a lot of people think that, how you use your science skills that you might have from mathematics to be successful. Mm-hmm. Also, I am, Asian, I'm Sri Lankan, and it's all about sciences. You have to be successful it's not just about the intellect, it's also about, EQ as well. But I didn't know that at that time. I thought that was too. So I was adamant, and also I failed on that previous occasion to make the grad program. So I was like, no, I want to see if I can get it this time round.
I see. Again, it's this, we're coming back to this mindset of, no, I will get there. This is just an obstacle, but I will 100% meet what I believe my success is.
Yeah. And so then I got it was a rotational program at ABN AMRO. And I actually got into the program. I was hired directly to the desk within a month. So that was a massive achievement because the guy that one of the interview panelists liked me so much that he had suggested I was a direct hire.
Okay.
So that was fantastic, but it was just before the financial crisis.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So survival skills had to kick in again because I was working in real estate structuring. So one of the areas that was impacted. So within 3 months, and I was sitting on the desk at the time where one of the guys I was working for looks at the managing director and says, "This bubble's about to burst, isn't it?" And he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, it is." And I just thought, gosh, I've got to figure out another role. So I managed to speak to HR and get myself back on the grad program, knowing that I could survive for a bit longer, to then find another opportunity.
Like what? I'm stunned. You are 22 now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you were like, right, I've got to be strategic about my career. If I am a direct hire, which 3 months ago was like, well, hey, amazing. 3 months later, you're like, this is not a good position to be in. How do I maneuver my way back into the grad program? What did your manager think of that? Did you discuss it with him?
Yeah, you had to. So what's interesting about how a grad program is set up in banks, it's around survival. It's survival of the fittest.
Okay.
You might have 500 people as part of a grad program, but actually only a small fraction survive.
Okay.
You need to find your next rotation. So you have to learn to openly lean into conflict or issues and say that this is what's going on.
Okay.
I mean, I had very supportive managers, and they thought it was a great idea, given what was going on, that it would make most sense for them to find another opportunity. And also, if you work hard, everyone is going to support you in what your next moves are. And they were very supportive for me to take the time out to meet other line managers, find other opportunities, and also give you the good reference that you require. You still require that for internal transfers as well. And I ended up on the trading floor.
And I think this is really important. Why were your managers so open to helping you? You just mentioned it now, but I'd like to explore it a little bit better, because a lot of people have expectations of what their managers should and shouldn't do, and they wonder why their managers aren't doing what yours were doing for them. So what do you think was the key? What do you think was the difference between them helping you and them not helping you?
So back then, what I would have said to you is that as long as I do a good job for them,
yeah,
and I'm achieving what they need for me to achieve and their goals, that's why they're going to help you, because you have done something for them. And generally, the manager is helping you because you make them happier. My advice now is about aligning your expectations, because you might think you're doing a good job, but how does that align to what your manager is trying to achieve? You need to have an open conversation around that, because generally employees and employers have misaligned expectations.
100%.
And a very specific thing for women, and I made this mistake too. You put your head down and you do all the work, and then you look up and go, I didn't get promoted. And I made that massive mistake, because no one knows you did the work.
Exactly.
So you do need to play the game in the system. The fact is that the systems are set up for a particular type of person, because it's a system from the legacy. So we need to be able to, it's responsibility of people like you and I and other senior people in our organizations to rip up that rule book, so that it figures out a way that each individual in an organization can thrive, and they don't have to emulate characteristics of one type of it's generally the type of male, and that's what success looks like. But while we're in this situation, you do need to flex and be able to showcase who you are, so that you don't have misaligned expectations, and therefore are able to be as successful on the organization's term and also in your line manager's terms.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point, but let's move fast forward a little bit. You've, since that time, so I take it you managed to survive in the role. Since that time, you've moved on from one financial institution to another, going further and further up in terms of your rank. How have you had that, what caused you to move so boldly, I guess is the best way I can put it, because you worked for, well-known financial institutions?
It was a natural transition for me. So what was happening is, in each role, I was building businesses. And it was like, well, what was the next thing? And it goes back to my resilience, the survival mentality. So you kind of go, okay, I've done this in one asset class. Can I build it out to another asset class within within ABN AMRO and RBS, and I went and did that. Then I was like, right, it was about for me, it was around listening. I was listening and seeing what was going on around me, and what skill set I realized in hindsight that I had developed was being able to really understand what I was seeing in front of me, whether that's in front of a client, and my job is very client facing, and simplifying that problem and bringing the problem that they have and what solutions an organization might have to bring that together. And that turned out to be a very useful skill set, because there's a lot of technical people that can just develop something, but there's very few people that can bring this together and develop a solution that the client will find interesting and using simple language to do so.
And so in essence, you found your superpower.
Exactly. And actually, none of us know what our superpowers are as a graduate. And that's what I tell. Yeah. And that's what I tell most graduates, is that you've got to trust in your life. What you need to figure out is, when you're as a grad, is, am I going to enjoy working for this person? Are they going to find the best thing out of me? Will I be able to learn lots of different skills? And then you trust in that person to help navigate what that is. And generally it takes, I think, for me, it took definitely 8 years plus before you start figuring out what your superpower is. And right now you have a lot of grads that come in expecting to be CEO in 2 years.
Yeah.
But actually, life, and whether it's personal work, is absolutely a journey. It takes time to figure out who you are. And I'm still learning that now. So once I found out that skill set, I ended up I moved from a technical role, from structuring into sales. I always thought, to this day, that sales was a second-rate job, because it wasn't technical. But actually, that's where I ended up falling into, because actually that's where my superpower really sat. What I realized then was, what you have to do is see where your relevance of your skill set is in the job that you're doing, or also how is it going to be relevant to the industry or a mega trend, because that's what's going to make the sustainability of your career going forward. Because your careers are long, it's at least 30 years.
Right, let's talk about that sustainability of your career. A lot of people are just thinking about today and tomorrow. Well, how long term do you think? You're looking at trends, mega trends. How are you thinking about this? Help us to understand that and how we should be thinking about it.
So for the business that I'm in now, you generally look at a 1 or a 3 year plan ahead, but you need to look about for tomorrow. And so you then have to look at 5 and 10 years, because you need to work backwards from that to flex and finesse the movement in what you're trying to do within your business, to be a bit more agile, to be able to do that. The biggest thing that's changed now is technology. Technology is changing the way in which we work. You could have had a plan that you had maybe 40 or 50 years ago, that would have lasted 50 years. It didn't matter. You could be in the same seat and the same job and you're relevant. Whereas now everything goes through phases and you lose it even in a month's time. So, for the organization I currently work for, it has been in existence for 325 years. How are you going to ensure that this organization is going to last for the next 325 years? That is a very different game, because of the way technology is impacting our lives and relevance, and the expectation actually of the next generation, who are going to be the employees of tomorrow, have a massive different view on how they want to work. So if you're going to attract those individuals, you cannot attract them based on your current leadership style, because their value systems are different, their expectations are different. So we have to actually review your 10-year plan, or much longer in the foresight, regularly. It's not like on an annual basis even. And those mega trends are super important. So, when I was in school, what was the most important thing then? Finance was a great opportunity. Doing blue collar jobs were great, whether that's accountancy, other areas where lawyers. Well, actually, can a lot of that be automated now?
Yes.
So if that's automated, should your jobs or what you apply for at school be different? Climate change is obviously a massive issue right now. So sustainability, yes, AI is a massive thing. So, going down that angle could be a different perspective. So you do need to look at what skill, growing up in the UK, opportunities are in abundance. It's very different to different economies that might be completely reliant on, I don't know, tourism, for example.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of opportunities, whether that's in the arts and other areas, but it's something that you need to consider in your career if you want sustainability. And you can go, a career is a labyrinth. It's not a direct pathway. Sometimes you need to take a step back to go forward, or a sidestep. And that's also okay. But you need to think about how you're going to have agility in your career if you are going to be having a sustainable career for the next 30, and actually could be 50 years. People find their next job, if you're thinking about the 100-year life, we have to retrain to do something else. You might be working in your 70s. You don't know anymore.
Agreed. But I think I like what you said about, so it's a labyrinth, and sometimes you have to go sideways, sometimes you have to go backwards in order to get to your goal. And this is coming from somebody who's clearly very goal oriented, and to sort of just keep your eyes on the prize, and then remember that it is a journey in order to get there.
Yeah. And I've taken those steps back.
Me through that. Because it's all well and good in theory, but I think what sometimes people need to hear is that other people have done it too. So have I, by the way. But talk me through that.
So when I left RBS in 2013, I took 2012, 2013. I took a year out. And that's a brave thing to do, because the fear is when you get out, can you come back in to the industry? Right. But I felt like I had worked now for 8, 9, maybe 10 years, maybe less now. And I felt like all I've learned was the job I want to do, and I want to have some time to reflect. And say, what would my next job look like? And actually, I took 6 months back, started applying for roles, and it was hard, by the way, because you're just a number.
Okay. Take me back a little bit. The moment you decided to quit, who did you tell? Did you tell your parents this? What was your rationale? Did you not think, what are they going to think? What are you quitting for? Nothing. So talk me through that, because there are going to be a lot of people that are in a similar situation that are about to make a decision that doesn't make sense. What were you thinking?
Well, interestingly, I thought my dad would not be supportive of something like this, because, he stayed in the same job pretty much his whole time since he's been in the UK, until he retired. So, but he was incredibly supportive, because he just saw how tired I was. I wasn't present when I went home to see my family. I generally went home and slept. So I was, constantly tired and overworked. He wasn't super keen on the idea that taking an extended period off and then what about getting back in was his only concern. Yeah. But to see how tired I was, he was just like, is this all worth it? And I gave pretty much all of my time to work to make it a success. So yes, it would, the question was, how long are you going to take out? And in theory, he was supportive of it. And over time, I was like, well, you're not going to apply to go back into work yet. Are you not going to do this? Are you going to keep on going? And that was quite hard.
Were you at home at this stage?
Yes, I did go back home. I went back home, and I was actually buying a flat at the same time. So that was
my gosh. Okay.
So
you didn't know whether you'd be able to afford the mortgage.
Well, that was a bit of the problem. There was a period I thought I'd get the mortgage before I'd left the organisation, and everything got delayed. And so, there was a massive fear, because all of my savings of everything I'd done for this job was in an escrow account with a lawyer. So if the final the final checks fail, that the deposit is lost, and that's all of my savings. So it was, timing wise, you couldn't control everything, but everything worked out for the best. I ended up, it came through.
Tell me something, because this is becoming very, very clear in my mind anyways, that the one question, not have fear? Like, are you not, you strike me as you speak, you have such, I guess, confidence, and you seem really assured, self-assured. Do you not feel fear?
Oh no, I do every day. I mean,
good. You're normal. Okay.
I mean, even now, for doing something new, you absolutely do fear it. I think I got used to putting on an armor, but once you work through the thoughts of fear, you can rationalize it. But absolutely, you have periods of massive anxiety. You have periods of imposter syndrome is a thing. It's about how do you empower yourself to work your way through it and not let it cripple you. And there is times that it has crippled me, but I had to make a decision in that period. I was very burnt out, and you had to take care of yourself. And I needed that time to recover. Now, did I do it as well? Yes, I took a year off. Yes, I relaxed. But I don't think I did it as well as I can do it now. Because well-being is really important to actually be very good at work. You need to know where your boundaries are. And that's something I'm ongoing and learning. So I'm not perfect.
No, sure. But when you say you would do it better now, give us an example of, some of the things that you would do if you could go back and do it again.
So what did I do? Yes, I worked out. I noticed that when I was walking, and it's going to sound very trivial, is that I noticed the trees and the leaves of the area that I walked in. Because what did I do otherwise? I was on my phone. Actually, no, I've got it right in front of me. I've got two, right? And so you're constantly like this, looking at what you're never present. So it was an unconscious thing, and I realized that I wasn't present. It was what I'm doing now is conscious. I understand like what's important and why. What I was doing there was unconscious. So I knew that I needed to work out. I needed to eat healthier. I needed to spend some time out to self-reflect, to find out what was it that made me successful. Because a lot of the things I did in that period, what is that? Probably 8 years, because I graduated in 2005. I did unconsciously. So I realized this is what my skill sets were. So then I could articulate better what I wanted from my next job.
Fantastic. And what was the story? Because when somebody's been out of work, what was your narrative when you got back into work? Because you can't say, I was burnt out, took a year out, and I'm ready to come back in. What was the narrative that you created in order to get back into work?
You're absolutely right. You can't say that. And I think it is, although now mental health or these sort of things are more open to talk around, it's still quite taboo to talk about back into work. What I'd spoken about was the move from the rationale for why I wanted to move from the sell side to the buy side. And the majority of buy side firms didn't like to take somebody on the sell side because they would go back in a few years.
Okay.
So me taking the time out was a conscious decision. I want to go into my side. Also, I spoke about a trend that they needed different types of salespeople. Understand the client, be able to create solutions in the room, and that's what my skill set brought about. However, it's still hard to get any of these recruiters or headhunters to put me for an interview. One of the things that they, because I wasn't using their language, I was using sell-side language that they did not understand.
I see. Okay. The recruiters or the hiring managers?
No, because you've got to get past the recruiters, and the recruiters are looking at keywords. And that's what I realised. And so I had to you had to adapt your style when you spoke to these recruiters, because they were like, why do I need to speak to you? And also you're not talking about anything that's relevant to me. So I had to analyse some of the job descriptions for sales roles and see what was the parallel. And then I flexed my CV to reflect those words, because until they saw those words, they didn't put you forward or even have a conversation.
Right. This is so basic, but the amount of times I've had the conversation with people to say it's not about what you can do. It is almost always about how the person you are speaking to perceives what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly what you're saying. You had to say, okay, I know I can do this job. I know I have the prerequisite skills, but it's not about that. I need to just sound more like I do. And this is critical in terms of a job search. This is basic job search information, but not a lot of people are empathetic towards the people that are hiring, because that's what you essentially did.
Yeah, you need to reflect the person opposite you. It's
Exactly.
not about you. Whether that's mirroring or whether that's labeling, you've got to get into their shoes, their mindset. Then you're just your own. Obviously, you have to be yourself, but you've got to why are you relevant to the person opposite you, and that changes. You've got to flex that style. That's one of my biggest learnings, actually, is to flex the style to whether you're talking to a recruiter who wants something specific versus the hiring manager different. And that's where your research really needs to come in. A majority of hiring managers are all over the web. You can get a feel for who they are.
100%. And this has always been my superpower, right? This ability to flex to the needs of the other person without changing who you are. Because everybody says, oh, no, I don't want to be fake. You're not being fake. You are simply stopping, reflecting. What is the person I'm speaking to, the person opposite me? What do they need? What are they thinking? What do they need to see in order to have confidence that I'm the right person? And it's 5 minutes and then some time researching, and that's it. Instead of, I know I can do the job because.
Exactly.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. Okay. So then, you made these moves and you progressed into your career. Did you, you mentioned it earlier, but the imposter syndrome. Talk me through how you deal with it, because now you get to a point where you're more senior in your career and you're now having conversations with important people. Not that you didn't always, but now it's at a different level. How do you deal with that aspect of things? Having the confidence to speak up in a meeting, without feeling, like you said the wrong thing, or not beating yourself up when you do say the wrong thing. In a meeting, but or in an interaction with somebody more senior. How do you get over that feeling of unworthiness, I guess is the best way to put what imposter syndrome is?
It's a very iterative process. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. So when you talk about, I didn't really understand what the word imposter syndrome really meant until I spent more time thinking about it and looking into it. But it is your own self-worth. You question your own ability. And that's something that you need to work on. And I've done a lot of work around that. So, what is it that I stand for? What is it that I believe in? And so as long as you hold your conversations true to that, you're okay and you can handle that. But actually that's very intangible, even as I describe it, to how you do that. So it's been iterative for me. It starts off with, preparation.
Yeah.
So if it's a meeting, and even now sometimes, depending on the group of people around that room, it's intimidating, even now, to speak up, because you might have 5 men constantly talking to each other and making a point that you're kind of going and you try and put your finger up, you're trying to kind of go and it's very hard to make your point heard. One of the things that I thought about, particularly when I started speaking on panels, is how do I interject? It used to stress me out because I would be on I prepped all the words of what I want to say. I couldn't have the opportunity to say it because I was always the only female, and there's always other men that always were type A that would just keep on talking. So the easiest thing to do is think about those midpoints on how you get yourself into that conversation. So a simple one is, that is a really good point, and I'd like to add.
Connector.
Yeah. Connector, that's exactly it. So that helped me, because I've got to say, being on a panel or at a conference when people are in the audience, even now I get nervous. Even though I might be a subject matter expert, because what do I think about is what I don't know. So again, what I have to remind myself is nobody knows everything. And if you don't know that answer, that's actually okay. And the easiest way to do that is deflect. Mm-hmm. And even if they push you hard, then you go, actually, I'm not the subject matter expert there. That's okay.
Yeah. And if you have the opportunity, you say, can I come back to this after I have done, a little bit of more reflection and thinking or studying, whatever it is.
Exactly. But being at a conference, it's all around the message you want to leave. And that message doesn't necessarily have to be what the other person's talking about or even what the panel topic is. So what you need to do, and people don't remember what the last person said either. You just have to own what message you want to give. So even if they ask you that question, if you say it with confidence, you will still get the applause at the end of that. So that's, a few tips on how you deal with imposter syndrome in conference settings. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, but what you are saying, and I 100% agree with it, it requires a level of discipline. And this is the bit that a lot of people often miss, that you have to train yourself almost, in terms of how to think about things. Instead of thinking, what don't I know? You have to tell yourself, I know a lot, but there are also things that I don't know, and that's okay. So it's like saying, I'm not going to beat myself up for this. And it's discipline in your mind to say, I'm not going there. I'm going to stay right here in this box, and I'm going to focus on my message. I'm going to focus on what I do know. I'm going to focus on connecting with the other, with the other people on this panel. And really, that's the bit that sometimes we're not willing to do the work on. We're better at letting our emotions take over our thinking, and then allowing that to paralyze us and stopping us from actually doing what we can do.
Absolutely, because I think we have a tendency to, how do we make our weaknesses into strengths? And it doesn't mean that you don't focus on how you improve your weaknesses, but we also need to spend time, as you say, on your strengths and how you own them. As you become a leader and you take on more and more responsibility, you are not an expert at everything. What you have to do is empower and take care of the people that work in your care. That's how your role changes. And actually, you don't know that. I mean, particularly, if you come from a low economic background, if you don't have other family members who are role models, you don't know what skill sets that you need to develop. And the leadership skill set is all of those softer skills, and you are not an expert. What you do is, what your ability to do is make decisions, maybe that you do it under pressure, you take on and you weigh it up from a risk reward perspective. But what your skill set is how you bring the right people in and the experts in the relevant areas to help make those decisions. And you might go against certain people, but that's what that is. And so imposter syndrome, once you start realizing that you focus in on your strengths, your superpowers, you acknowledge where your weaknesses are, you hire in people to do that, build that strength in the team or your firm, it actually balances it out.
100%. And then there is another part. I've got just 3 questions left for you. But there's a part in this, and again, you just mentioned it. Talk me through how important ally building in the organization is. So, you don't know everything, but one of the things I often share with people is this importance of making friends with people that are good at what you are not good at. And, really connecting with other members, using people at work as your allies rather than your competition or ignoring them, but actually really building networks internally within the organization and externally as well. Tell us a little bit about that from your perspective.
Well, it's driving diversity of thought and different perspectives. So you always want to seek opinions from people that don't have the same opinion as yourself, because you get a different viewpoint, and you seek to understand, because that's where you go from being closed-minded to being open-minded, because then you can see the different opportunities that are available to you. And absolutely, allyship is massively important. Networking is probably the most important thing that you need to do in your career, because that's how you get to understand an organization as well. And everything is multifaceted. It's not two-dimensional. It's probably not even three-dimensional. It's you've got to look at the whole picture so that you can deliver something, whatever it might be that you need to do for your own job, but also how you might want to see things for what your career projection looks like, because you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
And that's what you build out.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, you spoke about this idea of it being multidimensional. I think sometimes we just get so bogged down with doing our job, we forget that we're actually supposed to be thinking about this on so many different levels. The other question that I did have for you is, you talked a lot about your dad. What role has your mum played in terms of how you grew up and navigating being a woman in all of this? Because that also plays a part in it.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason for why I don't miss my mum as much is my mum has been absolutely influential in my entire life. She had cancer. So that's one of the things that's really impacted me, because I lost her when I was 19 years old.
Oh, no.
But absolutely, as parents, it was all around making sure their children had everything to be successful. And, you know, like I would say, my mum was a softer side to my father, to my dad. Yeah. And, you know, she really helped develop your EQ, you know, how to be supportive, how to care, how to, bring people together, work as teams. Like, you know, she gave a different perspective to my dad. And she was always there. So, you know, given that I was, doing all these things for work, she would take time off over my, GCSEs, my 11 plus, my A levels, to shuffle me around from A to B, make sure I had all the right nutritious food, to make sure I could be as successful as you can be, to be, the supportive shoulder. And so, my success today is the support for my parents, my brother, my extended family to get me to where I am today. So, and also to the mentors and sponsors that have got me, who have supported me throughout my career.
That's very interesting. And I think it's very interesting that, you looking at the work that you're doing now, you're an authoritative figure in terms of diversity and inclusion, and looking at the ways businesses can improve how they hire, how they think about teams, and this idea of neurodiversity, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that perhaps goes into including some of the softer aspects into work and into making work. So you're a massive champion of diversity at work, and of learning, and of thinking about ways to do things differently. Again, what inspires this side of your thinking?
I think it's just been, reflecting on my own experiences. It's been looking at how to get the next generation into work. That's what's really inspired me, and what's really held people back. And what got me thinking about this is I've been doing some just volunteering work where I speak at schools. Mm-hmm. And what I was seeing was you lost children, even actually probably by 16, you've lost them. You don't know what opportunities are available to you. So that's got me thinking about what is it that helps the next generation, and then what is it that helps them while in work. So yeah. One of the things are, as if you and I, or actually all human beings, we are intersectional. We are a sum of our own lived experiences. However, as you come up into leadership, you realize that the business process is set up for even 30 years ago. So if we look at a simple thing such as interview processes, it is a 4-stage process. Mm. Now, a 4-stage process does not work for everybody. So if I give you an example, a female who might be a mother, she hesitates to join an interview process because she's thinking about her arrangement that she has for children, and how she balances everything in the workplace. But when she's asked by a recruiter to interview, she hesitates. So she's not considered. Or she gets to the final stages and she hesitates. What her motivations are different from somebody that might not have those pieces of information. So in order for us to get diversity of thought, and if we're going to survive for the next 325 years, you need to have diversity of thought to drive commercial success. So you cannot have a business structure that is set for the past. It's what does good look like for the future. And we are all, the only commonality between you and I or anybody else is that we're humans. but that is it. So how is it that we have a fixed process for everything? So as a result, the majority of issues that you have is retaining diverse talent in the industry, because we don't flex our staff to make the success of each of those individuals. So that's what drives my thought process at the moment for how in the inclusion agenda, because it drives a commercial success. It's not just about doing the right thing. There is a game to this, and that's what needs to be connected for all organizations. And how do you make it simple to deliver that? Because if we look at the permutations, there's hundreds of different ways to do something, and it becomes, why should that be on an exec's top table to do as the right thing to do? And it can't just be a numbers game. It has to be a mindset shift that's required. It is responsibility, not just of the execs, but actually the middle managers, to make sure drive that change. And it's not easy. It's not easy because we have a commercial job. But as leaders, our biggest responsibility is to our people. And that's what we need to remember. And if we're going to be able to be successful, it is survival of the fittest. How are all of our organizations going to be relevant for tomorrow?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There does need to be a massive mindset and structural shift in order for businesses to be relevant for the world of tomorrow.
Absolutely. And the next generation that's, I'm in asset management, the wealth transfer, are not going to put up with organizations that are not aligned to their values. So actually, the time is now, and all of these organizations will be held to account, particularly with ESG and the corporate governance expectations being by influencers of money.
100%.
We will see the biggest change in the next decade.
I completely agree. And it's really important that the people that are listening to this podcast get on board with this way of thinking, and also, have a call to arms, and everybody begins to think about their part in the changes that are to come. This has been super interesting. And now I'm going to just give the floor over to you, because I've been asking you questions and directing, our conversation. And now I'd like to give you the opportunity to share, I guess, a little bit of advice that you may have to either, somebody that, is in a position that you once were in, or somebody that's just on their way up. And what pieces of advice would you have for them? What advice would you have for somebody that is navigating their career?
There's lots to say, but one really stands out for me. What changed my career was that when you look at performance, it's only 10% performance, probably around 30% image and 60% exposure. So in my career, I probably focused 100% pretty much on performance.
You're female, like I said, this is what we do.
Exactly. So my suggestion is the one biggest thing is work on your network. And it's not, we spoke about it earlier, it's about getting different perspectives in, but who are going to be your cheerleaders that help you through, that you can talk through ideas and thought process with, maybe at your level. Who is it that you're going to network with, who are going to be your sponsors in an organization and across the industry, that's going to help you to learn the skill sets to get the next step up, who can ask you, that you can engage with. That is by far the most crucial piece that anyone needs to work on to move up in their career. Because the next jobs generally aren't advertised. They're not, even by recruiters, it's really word of mouth. And as women, men have, and we all talk about it, the pub culture, and they get the next job while being in the pub. There's a lot of successful women out there, like help each other, work together, even network with each other. You learn a different perspectives, whether that's even in your personal life, how to manage things better. Someone will have a skill that they've done that you could actually implement yourself. And I really highly recommend that. The second part is soft skills. And I'm going to recommend a book, because one of the biggest problem that you have of someone that's, not part of the majority, is that you've got to be able to lean into conflicts. You've got to be able to seek to understand, to then find the way in which you can influence, get your pay rise or to get your next promotion. There's a great individual called Chris Ross on a book called Split the Difference. He is an FBI negotiator, and he also does a masterclass. Highly recommend And then the third part is, as women, is own who you are. And that's the hardest skill set to be able to figure out. But you need to, you know, if you're a mother, you see yourself as a mother first, a wife, and then you work, and then you think about your well-being as the last thing. But actually, you'll be successful in all those other areas if you actually think of your well-being first. Do something for yourself, because that will then sustain you for a longer period, so you can actually try and fit in and be good at everything, because that's the perspective that women generally have. They want to be good at driving everything, but you can't do that if you don't take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I amen to all of those points. And I actually have Chris Voss's book. I was looking for it on my bookshelf. It is a great read. I haven't done the masterclass, but you've heard it here first. Check out the masterclass as well. Appy, thank you so much. That was invaluable. And I think there's so many nuggets in what you had to share. Thank you for taking the time, because a lot of the things that people have said to me is they don't see as many successful women as they see successful men. So this is sort of our opportunity to highlight that, you know, they're not unicorns. You do exist. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we will meet again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to be here.